Hey,
Hey, hey, hey. Okay. You setting the
all right.
timer or me?
Do you have my outline there?
Yes.
I will set the timer. I'm going to set it.
Do you want to wait till after you share your kind of talking point or?
I'm setting it for 25 minutes
Okay.
because I have to get off anyways after that.
Perfect.
Okay, so here's where I'm at. I have a PLC coming up. Uh,
Should we tell people this is a Shorts? What
Welcome to
Shorts
Shirt
does?
Shorts.
Okay. Timer's going, so I guess that's what you get.
Yep,
Shorts. Here we go.
here we go. Here's what I do. I have a PLC coming up, and uh, we will start. It seems crazy to start February thinking about next year, but we start making a lot of decisions that dictate next year. When it comes to staffing, when it comes to handbook decisions, like we begin this process so that next year we're all on the same page. I do believe like let's iron some of this stuff out now so that we make better decisions, or that the decisions that make it into the handbook or into the policies, we are confident that they're not just theoretical. And so that's what I want to start the process. So it doesn't need to be wrapped up in my 30-minute PLC, but I want to start the process of evaluating what we've been doing and evaluating what we want to be. And actually was just listening to just a beautiful, beautiful song called Guiding Light by Foy Vance and Ed Sheeran. It's such a pretty song, Guiding Light. And that's what we need, right? Like if we're going to make decisions for policies and for handbooks, what is our guiding light? And our guiding light needs to be, what do we want to be, right? Who do we want to be?
Okay. Can I start talking now? I'll try to be fast and efficient. So, first of all, you said it was a 30-minute PD. Okay. So that already presents a challenge because so here's what I thought about when you posed this conversation to me. So a while back when we were first starting to work on our engagement content and you and I were really thinking it through and what it meant, you you
This
did
is
something
taking
that
a shit ton of time.
nope, it'll be fine. So remember, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So we're trying to go smoothly so we get there. Here's my point. You said that intellectual engagement has to be what everything else is pointing to. So the reason I mentioned that, and so I've shifted my thinking and language to make it about what do we do to keep people in the thinking, specifically the thinking we want them to do, right?
Okay.
So that's the first question I have for you is what do you want your staff actually thinking about and how will you keep them there? So the first challenge I pose to you based on what you said is you are a sweet, sweet man. You are poetic and romantic and all those things. I'm sweet talking you, right? Because I'm about to break you. Here we go. Here's what I mean. If you're too abstract, 30 minutes, people are going to leave the thinking quickly because they're like, what does he even mean?
Yep.
Who are, I don't even know.
So I have written down on the bottom of my notepad here,
Okay.
takeaway, right? Like I have this idea of like, they have to take something with them. We can't just sit in this theoretical. So I appreciate that. And actually you kind of almost gave me some direction already, which is whether we like it or not, we are already giving a guiding light, which is what you just mentioned it.
I say a lot of things.
Intellectual, right? Our
Yeah.
task
Yeah.
is intellectual growth. So that is our guiding light. We have to ensure that students are learning. Okay. So intellectual. So it actually kind of helps a little bit because in many of the conversations we've had in previous podcasts, when you say things like, well, it's the law that students have to be in your classroom, that gives direction, right? Like here's our parameters. How are we going to fit inside of it? So if I say our job, it's intellectual growth. We have to get our kids intellectually growing in skills and in knowledge. Okay, if that is our task, let's refine that a little bit, because if that is your goal, if you take from that high test scores, the unintentional consequences that you're going to teach the test. So what can we refine intellectual growth? What does that mean for us? I want to ask that question and I want them to wrestle with that. What is that going to refine that? Give me something to give some meat to that statement. Do you think that's
When
fair?
will they answer that? Yeah, but when will they answer that? In that
They're going to
30
answer it
minutes?
in small groups. And I want them to kind of, we're not going to come away with a plan right now. We're starting the process of thinking about this. So I want them wrestling with, because here's what I want them to do. I want to give them unintentional consequences when we say these things. And so I've actually thought about giving them examples of when we say we are students first. That sounds really, really good. give me the unintentional consequences of why that breaks down into bad cultures.
And they'll be able to do that.
Correct. So I want to say that. So I want to say if we are saying our task, our job given to us by the state, by the government, and by your contract is to get your kid intellectually engaged in growth, intellectual growth, and skill, let's put some meat to that. Would that be, you think, clear enough?
So here's a couple things I'm thinking about right now. So you and I once talked about this, and one of the things you pointed out is sometimes when you say something and ask for feedback from your staff doesn't know how you're going to use that. So in this case, does it make sense to tell the staff, whatever you share out today, here's how I'm going to use this information?
Yes. So I have written down that we're refining our guiding light for making decisions for next year. So I think I can say that. Here's how I'm going to use the information.
Okay. So then the other thing is, I think that you have to make it clear when this 30 minutes is up, this is what I will leave with, and this is what you will leave with. That way they know within these time constraints how far they're supposed to get, right? Because otherwise, here's why that also matters, because there's some guardrails in that. Because you're going to say, when we're done, I will have this and you will have this. And what that might help protect you from is, because if I'm not mistaken, one of your questions is supposed to be something about, all right, what might get us off track, right? That would turn into a bitch fest in no time at all, and you will get nowhere, and it'll be people just listing out all the complaints they have about schools, about life, about their drive in this morning, right? So there's got to be some pretty clear parameters on what that looks like, because it can't be a bitch fest. Here's an example. You might say, all right, so our goal here is to leave. I'm going to leave with some idea of what it means to all of you to be focused on intellectual engagement. I'm hoping you guys will leave with 3 or 4 more questions that will then help us fill this in later. One of the things that's true, though, is we know that there's going to be friction in the process, but here's my favor that I ask of you. Only share friction that appears again and again as part of this process. Not today's frustration, right? Not this week's frustration, but some frustration that is ongoing throughout the course of the year that might take us off track.
I appreciate that clarity. In my brain, the story that I use is marathon runners who have a very clear vision in mind. They have goals, they have times they have methodically worked through what it will take for them to win this marathon in a proper time. What they focus on and what they complain about often are the little pebbles in their shoes. Right. And so that's what I want to say. Like, that's often my analogy of we are going to go through this year, and I want to remove these little things that just you start focusing on all the time. What are those things? Constant that can easily be removed.
And those parameters are pretty good, because it could be something that is on their mind right now. Like, we can't be dismissive of that. It can be these little nagging things based on your description, right?
Correct.
So what are you going to do, though, so it doesn't turn into a bitch fest?
Well, we kind of use this language quite often when I give them the little note cards throughout the year of like, what's a friction point? And I just kind of keep saying these can't be things that I can't solve. And they can't be things that are either too big for me or things that are like very like specific to you, like your marriage. Right? Like, I don't get paid enough. It's got to be little things that I can solve. Like, somebody stole my 3-hole punch. This closet in my room has been there forever. It kind of smells. Right? Those are the things that I can say. So giving examples of like, what are things that frustrate you throughout the day that you find gets you off track from where you want to go, that derail you.
What if I personally have recognized a skill that I lack? Is this the time for me to bring that up?
You can, because what I'd like to do is even say, if you're doing this in your groups, the question that I have anytime somebody brings a friction point, I'd like the group to be able to say or answer the question, do we have a process already in place to solve that friction point? And if the answer is yes, point it out. It may not be a good process, because that's a whole nother problem. But if it's like, man, my students they're never on time. I am getting disrupted in my teaching all the time because students aren't showing up on time. Do we as a school have a process to deal with that? If the answer is yes, then we can talk about if it's working or not. If the answer is no, then I need to know that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So here's the other thing that I would say then again, because you're trying to accomplish so much in such a short period of time.
I don't need to, though. So if I need to refine this, that's okay too.
Well, here's what I'm thinking. I think you want to honor the very important task of saying this is who we are. But one thing that I'm wondering is if people will, without very obvious tangibles, if they will just run free lost. And here's what I'm thinking about: either a timeline of when you guys are going to get certain things done, or maybe even a hierarchy. So say this is us creating, we're identifying who we are. Here's what it's not. It's not our system change yet. It's not our process changes yet. It's not whatever those things might be. And saying those come next.
They can only come next. They can only follow who you are.
Right. And so I think if you give them, and think about it, if you have a nice visual, that saves you hours of conversation. So, because everybody can go, oh, wait, no, that feels like a process. We're not going there yet. Or that feels like a system change. We're not going there yet. Right. And
Okay,
so
so
that becomes something to point out.
So then maybe if this is a long process through the rest of the year, and maybe let's break this down. If I've only got 30 minutes, because we're going to do a couple minor things that will steal that 30 minutes. What if we just say we are simply going to define and clarify and work around the concept of our guiding light right now is instruction, quality instruction, or intellectual engagement? Do we just spend time then talking about how we do that? Because here's let me even just kind of give you an example. This is where this is kind of being inspired by. I was in Houston watching Coach Calipari beat Ole Miss, right, to get to the national championship. And
Coach Signetti?
What did I say?
You said Calipari.
I always say Calipari. Coach Signetti. I always say Calipari. Coach Signetti. And the phrase that constantly was used during that game was attention to detail. He pays so much. And I thought to myself, well, what's the difference between paying attention to detail and being a micromanager? Because his paying attention to detail, his athletes actually succeed in it because they know exactly what's expected, but they're allowed some autonomy within it. But he pays attention to every detail. But if you are a micromanager, you won't be very successful. And so when we say phrases, I want to spend time breaking that down as a staff, intellectual.
So let me ask you this first. Are you getting ahead of yourself by announcing to the staff that who we are is we are a school that focuses on intellectual engagement?
Because we have to. That's not our choice.
So how are you going to distinguish between this mandated thing telling us who we are, while also then giving them the freedom to fill that in?
Because I think the example that I could use is we are given laws that we have to follow, but you can follow the laws and be a shitty person.
Yeah. So you've clarified that, because initially I thought you were going to ask the staff, like, who are we? And you were going to kind of lay that open. But what it sounds like is, here's who we have to be. What does that look like here? So is your conversation then about what are the pillars that will get us there, that we will all work on together?
Well, I think the pillars, what if the pillars, and this might sound elementary, but I honestly don't think we do this enough as a staff to get us all on the same page. Because like I said this morning, like I have some staff, if you add up the front page, our district prints all the staff and how long they've been here. If you add up the number of years on the front page, we're at like 300 years or more on the front page of 10 teachers and the amount of time they've spent in the classroom. And then I have a teacher that today is her very first day ever having her own classroom. So that gap is huge. So what if the pillars are, if we say the goal is intellectual engagement or growth, we can define maybe what that is. The pillars are what we do and how we do it. I want to say why, but I don't know if that's appropriate.
Do they get to build the pillar then? Because to me, that's amazing.
I think that they should.
And that way they will truly feel some ownership. And so I'm glad we had this conversation, because I really thought you were basically just creating a vision.
No.
But you're not really saying the vision has to be something aligned with intellectual growth or learning.
Yes.
And so we need to, as a staff, create the structure. Because I even to your point, what you just said, it'd be amazing if a couple of teachers said, you know what? One of our pillars is we will support each other. And that can look like, when we have new teachers, here's how we support them. When we have, you know what I mean? Like, what an awesome pillar that would be.
So could that be, when I first wrote down what, I thought that was pretty elementary in terms of like, well, it's your content, but it's actually not. Because then you can put in like, what are some other things that we do that create intellectual growth in our building? And it can
Yeah, I
be,
would just say it out loud. Just say, hey guys, the who, what, why, when, where, how. I get it. It's overused. It's very elementary. But the fact is, it works right here. And I'm not going to not do it just because it seems silly. Because really, what we are trying to define is who are we? How are we going to do the work? When are we going to do the work? Right? And just kind of run through that
yes.
process with them. That's the front loading empathy that I talk a lot about.
So I think, yes, I actually like that front load empathy, but I actually think, so if I have three pillars of what, and we talk about the things that we do, because then I think what you can even do is you can say, okay, what are we doing that's actually not, like, we're taking a lot of time, but it's not helping us with our goal, right? Can we carve off some stuff? Or what are we missing? What group of kids are we missing? How we
Well,
do it, that's the process, right? Like,
yeah.
we're going to do it with professionalism, we're going to do it with kindness. We can kind of work through that. But then I actually think we can spend some time on why. Why are we, like, why do we care about this? Because if we just, that gets into this, like, I think what it can do is if we say, because we want our kids to be intellectually strong, and we don't say, and we want them to be good people, then we make a lot of decisions that negate this part that's never on a test. But then you can you can spend 2 weeks off content working on these things because we've said this is important.
Or 2 minutes every day on off
Yes.
content in the process. So a couple things. Is that question about why going to be an overplayed question? Find your why, that kind of thing. So will your staff kind of, jerk back to that when they're like, no, I don't want to do that. So that's one question I have for you. And then the other question, I distinguish between morals and values. Morals are really kind of up to families to decide. But the conversation about what does our school value, I think, is a worthy conversation.
So where does value fit in? How? What do we value?
Or why? I mean, we might say because it's important to us, our why is that we want to help students become great people with great lives. So that's our why. So that's what we value. And here's what that looks like. That looks like being able to
I
talk to
actually
other
like that
students.
question. It seems a little bit weird underneath why to then have a what question, but it makes sense. And actually, I can point to when I taught at one of the high schools there in Gillette, and I still have the picture. They published their what we values kind of throughout, and one of them was go to school so you can buy this, and it was a nice car. And I thought to myself, that is contrary to my why. That's not why I'm here. I'm not doing all this so that you can buy a nice car. And so I do think that question is, what do we value? It's important. I kind of like that. It's weird underneath the why, but I think it's important.
Well, and as you and I have discussed or sat here in this, how much time do we have left?
We have 5 minutes and 40 seconds.
So remember what you and I work on day in and day out. That, what we value, is the cultural piece, right? So you're building culture. Your focus on keeping your staff and your students in the thinking, right? That's intellectual engagement. When you have this collaboration and you talk about how we'll communicate with each other, how we'll talk, it's social engagement. So I don't want to belittle adult learners. So we're not going to use the exact same strategies with them because we want to respect and honor where they're at. But there is the reality that keeping them in the thinking is the goal. So a question about what do we value is going to keep them in the thinking because that's an important question to them, right? We're not saying, draw pictures of all the things you love like you might with students. You're just posing a provocative question. What do we value? That keeps them in the thinking. And that's what we want to do for our adults. Get them thinking about the things we want them to think about.
You could say, and what do we value? And how do we answer that question? Well, what do we celebrate?
Yep.
What do we promote? What else? Talk about?
Yeah. It's a tough question because, so I would add to that, what are our icons? What do we see around the building?
Sure.
So whether that's pictures of students or pictures of staff, we have, in our commons area, we put a picture of every student in there. So when we talk about what is our culture, what do we value the students. That's just a little example of that.
So then if this is, we're wrapping up here. So I like that we've refined this to just one of the pillars, which is we're going to talk about our identity. And our identity has to be an intellectual engagement. Now we're going to break that down so we're all on the same page because that's our task given to us by the state, by the government. So then we walk through this we define our intellectual engagement through what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. What do we value? Right? Those are gonna be our 3 pillars. Are you okay with that so far?
Yes. I'm going to let you finish, and I have one more question for you.
Well, then my question is, if I say, and if we say at the end of it, I'm going to take this information and I'm going to start creating, finding this into, here's what we say is our focus. This is our goal. This is our guiding light. And here's how we say we're going to do it. I'm going to produce that. I'm going to give it back to you. You can refine it. What is their task? What is their takeaway?
So I was about to ask you both of those questions, and it sounds like you've already answered it for you. So let me just ask you, what do you want your staff to leave with?
Well, I would like them to leave with some sort of, it's going to be difficult that we won't have a culmination thing that we can walk out with. But I would like them to start thinking about, when you leave, I want you to start asking yourself, if our goal and our guiding light is intellectual engagement, kids are progressing in academic growth and kids are progressing in purposeful skills. Maybe I can ask them, like, what, I don't know.
Let me ask you this. Is it okay if you leave them with just maybe these 2 things? So one, you're leaving them with a true understanding that you respect their thoughts and opinions and you're going to take them with you and kind of close with that concept. And then you leave them with another gift, which I believe strongly in, which is you will, before this school year is up, everyone in the building will know what it's going to look like as we enter next year. And that shouldn't be a stressor over the summer.
Yeah,
to me,
but I'm going to give this back to them much sooner than that. I mean, we have a lot of
No,
more
I
work
know
to do
that.
with this.
I'm just saying, if you leave them with that idea that the reason we're doing this work now is because when the school year ends, we will know what the start of next year looks like, and we will be able to get after it when that year starts. Some people find stress when they go into the summer and they're not quite sure what the next school
is. There something that I could give that says that I know now, whether it's because it's directly from me, much like the government gives me directive that I can say as your principal, this is a directive, or that I just know that they're going to say, that I can say, use this lens for the next month, use this lens. And I want you to come up with examples of, or contrary to, this is something that I need you to focus on for the next month. This is our focus.
Well, is your staff going to decide what the pillars are? You ask the questions, but maybe that is what you leave them with, is a place or a way to jot down, I noticed this pillar is strong and we want to maintain it, or I noticed that we are suffering in some way in these pillars, and these are things that we should talk about before the year's up. Is that close to what you want, or does that
It's a little bit, but
enough?
it's still too vague. You might have a teacher or two who takes it, but I want something like tangible, simple. This is something that I need you to think on for the next 2 weeks. Because
what's the one question you want answered 2 weeks from now? Sheesh. What do we value, right? Can you just leave it at that? What if the question is, based on what you see right now, what do we value? What do we want to do to make those values more aligned with the work that we're doing?
What do we value? In 2 weeks, you're having your team meetings, and I want each of you to come with an answer to that question to your team leader, and they're going to gather that information and bring it to me. And I want to see what we as a team, and I won't know who's who. I want to see what we value. And it's so we can, okay, I know we're out of time. And I don't mean like what we want to value. I mean,
actually,
when you watch, you look at the hallways, you listen to announcements, you tell me, I used the term before, what gods are we worshiping? What do we value? Is that okay?
I think it's great. I mean, a more complicated version of that would be, what do you want to value and what is challenging that value right now? But I think that maybe is too complicated. Yeah, I like, what do we value? What do we actually value in the work based on the work that we're doing day in and day out in this school? All right. We went too long.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. We'll see you, brother.
See ya.